This is the Palisadoes Foundation. We are a California-based 501c nonprofit organization that aims to provide new avenues for promoting Jamaica's technology businesses and talent by using a series of programs which create increased awareness of the island's abilities in the global marketplace. The Calico Challenge is our premier program, where each year students receive a summer software development internship. They work on open source projects under the guidance of a mentor. Stipends are paid upon achieving predefined milestones. There has been close technical collaboration over the years between the Foundation, the University of the West Indies Department of Computing in Mona, the University of the West Indies Computing Society, and the University of Technology's IEEE Students Branch to identify open source projects, student sub-projects, and mentors. In this podcast, we'll be talking to Stacey Hines. She's the newly elected president of the Jamaica Computing Society and has a senior management role at the ICT group of companies in Jamaica. Stacey, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Peter. Thanks for having me. Very excited to be here.
Thank you, Stacey. One of the questions that always comes to mind is the mission and purpose of the Jamaica Computer Society. What exactly is the mission and how is it being achieved at the moment?
The overarching mission is to focus on providing tech resources, tools, and access for IT professionals, IT companies, and entrepreneurs and students so that we can collectively support building and maintaining digital Jamaica.
What type of memberships do you have in the organization?
Well, we cater to students, and that is both at a secondary and tertiary level, as well as professional organizations, so large and small corporations, and also for entrepreneurs. We do also offer individual membership. However, it is now being linked more closely with entrepreneurship.
And what are the key events in the Jamaica Computer Society calendar?
Well, our events calendar is actually now being recreated. For a long time, we have hosted events primarily based on other activities that certain member organizations are hosting. And the way that that is shifting is we are now looking more closely at the market to see what is at demand in the marketplace because technology and digital media changes so often. So as an example, we wouldn't typically have a digital marketing event at JCS, but that's something that's now of interest and would most likely be a part of our calendar. We do have a couple of standing events. One, the Knowledge Forum, which is usually geared towards the student bodies of tertiary institutions, where we bring together experts in the different fields and have them come and share in a forum type of setting. And then we also have a biannual or a conference that we host that's a business technology conference called BizTech, which would be on calendar for next year if we choose to follow the same set of calendars that we've had before. But as I said, we are in the midst of revisiting all our events to basically align with what is a need in the market.
So you're saying that you're reevaluating the importance and relevance of the JCS to IT professionals?
Well, not just IT professionals, because I think that's part of the challenge that the JCS has faced in the past, is that it's been highly viewed as just focused on IT professionals, when the truth is that technology impacts everyone. And as such, what we want to be able to do is to be focused on the IT professionals with an outward view of how that is actually impacting digital Jamaica.
So it's a focus that's more holistic, including the end users as well.
Yes, that's correct.
What influenced you to pursue a career in IT?
Well, I started out really early on. Actually, my dad is a techie. He used to be a computer operator on Wall Street, and I went to work with him a few nights because he used to work sometimes the night shift down in the server room, with all those big machines. And I just remember being fascinated by that concept. I just didn't get what he was doing. I found it interesting. And then I just essentially said, well, I want to do what my dad does. So I decided I would pursue that when I went to university. And what it opened up for me was just an understanding that it was so much more than the big servers. And coming out of university, I thought, well, okay, how can I really get neck deep in technology outside of just using computers? And I started off with coding, didn't really like it so much, and then shifted into training. And it was actually through that training avenue. I was working with an institution that did Microsoft certified training courses. And so through working with them, I kind of discovered that really the purpose of technology is to serve and enable businesses. And so I started to explore what other things would you do with technology in a business. And so that led me to writing manuals, like more instructional design. And then quality assurance came out of that because I had to be testing the software to see if it was actually doing what my books were saying it was supposed to be doing. And then coming from testing, I kind of fell backwards into systems analysis and requirements gathering. And I essentially just ended up touching all aspects of information technology. And that created my career path.
It's interesting that a lot of this stuff that you're talking about are topics that are often touched upon by business analysts in the current environment. And it seems as if that you've managed to parlay that into the current role that you have at the ICT group of companies as the strategic planning chief. What technologies that are novel in terms of approaches is the ICT group pursuing? And how are these approaches being used to influence decision making and operation?
Well, that word novel, I think, is when you use it against technology, it's really highly dependent on the environment and the industry, right? So, for example, the technology that I think we use at Wicon for building our homes allows us to build mass produce homes faster than and at a higher quality than probably a local construction company or a local builder would be able to do, like a one-man shop would be able to do. When we use the term novel, we really want to be careful in how it comes across. I think we are doing some of the more mainstay technologies nowadays. So for instance, one of the companies in the group, they have a portal online and a mobile application. Like those types of things, I think, are pretty mainstay. We do also have another company that is a tech first company, and they are similar to a Groupon in the US, which is like a deal site where their focus is on providing locals with access to the simple pleasures like hotel, restaurant stays, spas, etc., at half the price, which you typically wouldn't be able to do. And we're using technology to support that. So that I think is somewhat novel to the environment that we are in. And in addition to that, they are also offering a sort of fintech kind of product where you're able to get credits. The company is called Gustazo's, and you're able to get Gustazo's credits, which is essentially like cash that you can use with preferred merchants. So I think, that's a bit of a novel approach for our environment.
That's interesting to hear. In my particular business, when I'm not doing work with the Palisadoes Foundation, we do a number of technology approaches within the industry that we're in. The industry that we're in is the data center industry. On the surface, it doesn't appear to be one that's extremely dynamic. But one of the things that we've been having issues with over the years is trying to find software that can be used effectively and in a very flexible way for our customers to view the data that we are gathering on their power usage, their network usage, etc. And as a result of that, being able to present that in a portal format. In the data center industry, the sources of information are quite often obscure. And as a result of that, though it may seem not to be novel, it's novel in the fact that it's unique from the perspective that it's not been seen before.
Right. Yes.
And in many cases, we use open source software for this purpose. And I was wondering, to what degree is open source software being used at the ICT group of companies?
Not very much, I would say. I think one of the things that we are doing a lot of is tend to hire from the intern pool at the university, and then we bring those students in to support us on projects. And when they are executing on projects, they may recommend an open source type of solution that we can use to solve a particular problem. Like, let's say if we're creating an API for something, they may choose to look at open source as an option for that, but it's not what I would consider to be widely used because we don't actually do a lot of our own coding. And where we don't do a lot of our own coding, we tend to more lean towards SaaS tools that are already available, tested, and have a lot of information about their success or failure in the market.
As the head of your group, how have the skills changed in terms of the requirements for your employees over the last 3 years, and why?
Well, I can tell you that I think just in general, one of the things that's really cool about ICD Group is that we are very clear that the world and business are constantly changing. So I think there's just the leadership team in general is very forward thinking and innovative in that manner. So we're not so tied to tradition as a lot of other companies, I would say, on the island are. With that in mind, I would say that we are recognizing the shift in not just the type of skill sets that we'll need, but also how we go about attracting, retaining, and developing that skill set. So the millennial team member is going to be very different from your baby boomer team member. And this is probably the first time in history, I believe, that you have such a wide array of generations in any one working time frame. And with that, and with the changes in technology, what you'll find is that you have to more lean towards not just the technical skills, but really hiring for the softer skills and then training on the technical. So we are very big on conscious leadership and on culture and mindfulness as a part of what is linked to productivity and to having a common way of thinking and speaking that really lends itself to us delivering high quality and in excellence. So we do a lot of, I would say, investing in leadership development at all levels of the organization. And when we are hiring, we do take not personality in terms of their openness to that type of development into as serious consideration as whether or not they're strong at, coding skills or whatever else that people typically look for, the technical side of things.
You've touched on a number of different areas in terms of skills. What sort of skills would you recommend that people develop for the next 3 years, given what you're seeing from your level within the group of companies?
If you're asking about technology skills, I think in general, every person that's coming out of university now should be looking at understanding machine learning and that the context of artificial intelligence in whatever area or field they're interested in. Because I think that when people talk about AI, it's a huge category that doesn't seem to get filtered down to, well, AI is utilized in different ways across different industries. So I think definitely understanding machine learning and how it applies to any particular area of interest is one. I also think that analytics, just hands down, really people are definitely more intentional about utilizing data to make decisions, especially at a strategic level, like looking for direction on where to take a company or what products to put out or how to service a customer. Data has just really taken over in that space. And, they talked about content being king. Content is just one type of data. There is so much wealth that is available in analytics and a wide sphere of avenues that one person can take. So I think that is something that is really critical. I wouldn't necessarily say coding because I think it's one of the skill sets that overshadows a lot of other needed skills. I would actually say critical thinking. And that comes from knowing that within technology, most other technical skills, including coding, can be learned. But if you are really not, like for me, if I'm less inclined to hire someone that has a technical skill, if I can't get them to just think and solve problems. And I think that's at the core of computer science and information technology, at least when I was in school. One of the main things, it was always a problem you were solving. And I believe that we somehow skip over that when we are talking about the top skills that kids need to have coming out of school. So if you're coming to me, and I hire quite a few millennials, if you're coming to me for work and you're not thinking about how you can solve a problem and then being able to then choose what path for technology you would want to see applied to solve the problem or what you'd recommend as a solution, then that's a big red flag for me.
Interesting to hear. I spoke with Jeff Waddington, one of the sponsors of the Palisadoes Foundation's Calico Challenge once.
Real decoy. Yes, I know Jeff well.
At Real Decoy. And he was mentioning the fact that one of the things that he would like to see more Jamaican students having is work experience before actually starting in the full-time work environment after graduation. even though the experience of working in a summer internship is considered to be not as critical as years of experience full time, it allows students and persons to get an idea about the company culture, the reporting structures, challenges that are being faced by the organization in an observer status. And then when they start working within the company on a full time basis, they are already pre primed for that sort of information. And he was talking about the fact that it really does help his company to provide the interns that work for him with meaningful projects so that they can start thinking about these sorts of challenges prior to working with him full time upon graduation. It's interesting to hear about
Yeah.
that perspective. So my next question is related to the coronavirus. It's the top thing on everybody's mind now in 2020. Because of the new requirements in which people are supposed to stay in place at home, is telecommuting a viable option for Jamaican IT professionals now? And what challenges need to be universally tackled?
Well, that's actually a really good question because I launched an initiative coming out of the COVID situation that was geared towards helping persons transition to remote working. And we're going to be having a series of experts on over the next several weeks, however long we're home, and maybe after, just talking about remote working and virtual opportunities and how IT professionals can either take advantage of the current climate by providing expert and support services, or how we can supplement the need, because I think it's a very viable option. I just think there needs to be more conversation around it. And also, there are some hurdles that we have to jump through in terms of earning outside of the boundaries of the island, right? Primarily around getting paid because of our payment gateway restrictions that we have. So I think it's a very viable option for IT professionals. And I don't know that we have been taking enough advantage of it. I will say that since the virus has gotten here, that the IT professionals I know that are in my space, which is quite a few, that their work has increased significantly. And while for an IT individual, it may be pretty straightforward to work from home because you already have that set up, the persons that you're trying to serve may not. And so that's where I think there's a gap that we have an opportunity to fill. And, that's part of the reasoning behind the initiative and having a microsite that kind of speaks to the support that can be given. In terms of what needs to be universally available, I think that there is a need for us to have a standing corporate policy. I think remote work policies were somewhat of a back burner issue until COVID came about. We actually got contacted the most about remote work policies and how to assess who works from home, who doesn't. So I think having a corporate policy available across the island would be something that would be great. I don't know that the government needs to mandate it or anything like that, but I do think coming out of this, whether it needed to be or not, it now is a necessary policy and procedure that has to be a part of the organization. I do think that it needs to change from the perspective of having it available even after COVID, because while I think some companies are seeing, we may need to look back at this and see whether or not it makes sense to just have a certain percentage of our workforce be remote. I do think you have some companies that are doing that, but I think the greater majority may be waiting for COVID to pass so they can get back to business as usual. And I just don't think this is a go back to business as usual kind of event. I think we're going to see changes. Definitely in terms of internet access and cost. And from a resource perspective, I think that companies that are taking on allowing remote working to happen should look at the benefits that North American and some European companies offer, where they cover the cost of your internet, for instance, or they provide you with an internet SIM card or dongle or something similar. I would say that I don't know that we are structured for that here, but I think it's something that we would have to have as a tag along for any kind of work from home policy that we put in place. And also when it comes to even devices, because while you may have a lot of students that are doing IT, I don't know if they have the devices at home. So even when they transition to work, they may get a work laptop or be at a desktop, but do they have that at home? I think that's another thing that needs to be a part of the remote policy, where it's a tag along, that you just get the resource with you, to provide that service. So I think that there are some things that we were struggling with in that space of remote working that we'll be able to leapfrog coming out of COVID.
That's interesting what you're talking about, the fact that the employees may not necessarily have the tools and resources to access the
Hmm.
internal systems of the company. One of the things that
Yeah,
I've noticed when I've been speaking with the students with the Calico Challenge is that many students stay late at UTech and UWI, way into the small hours of the morning, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, just because they don't have internet access at home.
at home. Yeah.
And as a result of that, it's a real challenge for many of these students. And even though there's the possibility of working from home, and even on the Calico Challenge, that quite often it's not really a viable reality for them if they're going to be at home. They have to go back into the university environment. And with the closures that are having now, the likelihood of that is greatly diminished. What are your criteria for hiring new university graduates?
Aside from problem solving skills, it would be ability to collaborate and work in a team, because even when you have, let's say, introverts or anything like that, and somebody that is not necessarily outgoing, etc., I think you can still have persons who exhibit the ability to collaborate with others and work with teams. And I would say that that probably is another one of the top skill sets that I would look for.
One of the things that is very noticeable about the graduates that are coming out of the universities is that 40% of STEM graduates in Jamaica are women, but they seem underrepresented in the software engineering job area. What do you think are the causes, and what is being done to increase the participation of women, and what more could be done?
Well, this is an interesting one. And I'm actually just coming into really, I would say, being present to the extent of it, because I never used to pay attention to gender parity, because I've always thought that I was getting ahead. It wasn't until I started looking at the numbers I realized, oh, you could have gotten further ahead. What I would say is that I think there is a lot of opportunity that may get stymied on the immediate postgraduate, like when you have young female graduates just entering the working world. I think unless you are actively, yes, I'm a coder, or maybe somebody that's going to be on help desk, I find that organizations that don't have a strong technology lead, like a strong CIO or a strong strategist or somebody like me, a strong business leader that understands the power and paths of technology, it's very difficult to have women find their place. I recently spoke at a Caribbean Women in Tech conference about a month ago now. And essentially, one of the things that came up, it was almost like 80 women, right? And one of the things that came up was that they just tend to give up. Like once they get in, they tend to give up because the men seem to galvanize all the different potential tech roles. So when it comes to like infrastructure or networking, women aren't typically viewed as persons who'd be interested in that category of work. And I don't have statistics from Jamaica enough to be able to speak from a numbers perspective. But what I see is you may have one or two shining stars that through the business route and their knowledge of technology end up in a senior technology role, but that's rare. What I see more of are men that are technically capable, either in infrastructure or, coding or like IT shop management, that become technology leaders, and then they hire more men like them that are technically skilled, but try to get them to manage a project end to end that has a technology tool as an enablement. It's the women that are coming in as project managers. So when I look at the flip side of that, where you have like a female CIO or a strong female technology lead, then you'll see more women who are analysts or IT program managers or systems requirements gatherers. Or so as an example, when I worked with Macy's Systems and Technology, because it was an IT focused organization in North America, what I found was that you had somewhat of a balance between the amount of males and females. Even though you may have had more men on-prem, there was still a high concentration, let's say 60-40, and the women were in all positions at all levels. So when you compare that to, a Jamaican company, if unless you have a leader that is female, you're not going to see that kind of equitable spread across the organization.
It's particularly striking for me because 40% of graduates being women in the University of the West Indies system in the STEM area is notable because in the United States the number is only 20. And yet when you see the graduating class of 40%, you notice that you don't see the representation in the workplace. And one of the questions I keep asking IT professionals and technology leaders is if you're walking away from 40% of your labor pool, you are automatically hindering your competitive advantage. And what answer do you have to that? And I think it's a type of question that needs to be asked, not just in a formal way, but also in an informal way throughout the community to try and figure out what needs to be done.
Well, I can tell you that we did a survey a couple of years ago when we were looking for women in tech and trying to get a sense of some of the challenges that they experienced in the space and why they didn't pursue careers. And the things were pretty straightforward. Annoying male manipulation, and that can look like anything from the old boys club and shutting out the women to sexual harassment, which in Jamaica is not something that is really properly spoken about or documented, to not being offered promotions in the technology space or not being mentored towards growing in the tech space. So I think if we are to really start to tackle the challenge, it begins with, again, that leadership and seeing, and the persons who are the CEOs or even the boards of these I have boards that are all men still. And I believe that it always starts at the top.
It's really interesting to hear what you're saying. We've been talking about percentages, and we spoke about the percentage of women in the organization, but there's a difference as well, in that also it's anecdotally told to me that only about 25 to 30% of all IT graduates leaving university are hireable at the moment. And I was wondering what you feel could be done to make it to be 100%. Mentorship is one thing that you'd mentioned previously. Are there any other things that could be done to make that number move from 25, 30 to 100%?
Oh, definitely. I think the universities can definitely do better at getting their third and fourth year students into companies. That's something that can actually be a government initiative along with academia. When I lived in Canada, one of the programs that I really admired was a co-op program. And at the time I was VP for a software development company there. And one of the things that they required or offered, you got a tax benefit for taking on co-op students, a certain percentage of co-op students based on the size and I think revenue of your company. And if we had something like that, and it doesn't mean that they stay with you, It really just means that they come in and they have to get training just like you would train somebody that comes to you with a resume, and they have to work on real projects and deliver for real projects. And I believe that made persons much more prepared for the working world. And I think that may be what Jeff was talking about, because Jeff is Canadian and he would have experienced the co-op program. And I think that's a huge gap here in the universities and what they offer. And I'm hoping to see that we kind of leapfrog from where we are now, because I think we're very behind on that.
You'd mentioned a macro type of approach with the government providing incentives towards having these sorts of mentorship programs. In what ways could the JCS interact with Jamaican schools and universities to provide assistance as well?
Well, I think that it kind of goes back to the same challenge that you face. I think the JCS can create enablement through workshops and also through providing linkages between companies that are seeking interns and the universities. However, our members would have to be very active in making that happen, because currently it's primarily a voluntarily run organization. When it comes to organizations that are structured that way, a huge dependency is on the membership to facilitate creating that, because the JCS on its own, in terms of like the exec body or even the secretariat, can't create that. So we would need the membership of the Jamaica Computer Society, which includes your academic heads as well as member companies, to agree to participate in a program that would allow for providing linkages between placement of students and career opportunities, and not necessarily career opportunities because they're going to stay with your company, but because you're going to train them up, not just technically, but also on the soft skill required for them to go out and get work.
One of the things that I've noticed also with my involvement with the Palisadoes Foundation and the students is that quite often the students aren't aware of the companies that are out there in the marketplace for them to actually approach. They don't have contacts in the business. And quite often, the first time that they have any interaction with companies is on the career days, which are usually in the March, April timeframe, just before graduation.
Right.
And the thing that's surprising to me is why Jamaican companies don't take advantage of the opportunities of meeting with students in all the club meetings prior to April, such that when April comes around, it's the time to be actually signing the deal for the students being hired rather than starting the process from zero at that point in time. The familiarity would be there, contacts would be there. You'd be able to scope and understand the student body that's coming in, understanding the dynamics. And you have a great advantage if you involve yourself, even if it's one or two meetings prior to it. This is one of the things that we tried to do with the Calico Challenge with the Palisadoes Foundation, try to get many of our sponsors to approach and talk to students beforehand so that they have an insight into what's going on. And then when the students are actually participating in the program, at the very end, the sponsors get to see firsthand the projects we have, Google Hangouts, and we record the outputs, etc. And so that's some of the types of things that we've been doing. It's been interesting to see how the JCS in your new role could potentially have new avenues to interact with students prior to graduation. In closing, what life skills are essential for a successful IT career?
The core life skill that is essential for IT and any career, quite frankly, is self-awareness. I think there are a lot of unconscious persons roaming the earth. And by unconscious, I mean that we are not in touch with ourselves. We are more following what we think we're supposed to do versus really listening to our inner selves and identifying, the path that we are being taken down or creating for ourselves. We tend to get into the routine of life, wake up, check the phones, eat something, drink coffee, get myself adrenaline pumped up so I can go and work, so I can get a paycheck, so I can buy the stuff to do it again. There really isn't that awareness and research around what is the life I can create, what is available to me in the space of technology that can impact the world and add value. I think you're seeing that a lot with companies that are the unicorns or the unprecedented, like your Googles, because you have those persons who decided that they wanted to change the world or they wanted to create that impact. And I think it took a great deal of self-awareness and possibility thinking in order to bring certain things like that to light. And I feel that that is one thing that is key, bringing that level of self-awareness and then following that with just limitless possibilities as a just way of thinking of life would be the first two life skills, I would say. And then third, which you can certainly train up, is being resilient. I think that IT is something that is consistently morphing. It's something, your digital space is never going to stay the same. It's only going to continue to grow exponentially. And we have to be able to be fluid and change with the times, regardless of whether those times are up times or down times, like what we're experiencing now. It requires a bit of resilience and fluidity to be able to do that.
Stacey Hines, President of the Jamaica Computer Society, thank you very much for talking to us on our podcast. And I look forward to working with you and the Jamaica Computer Society in future. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.